Voila, it's the Peugeot 308. The main purpose of this car is to send Peugeot further upmarket. That is their goal. There's a new badge on this car, there's a new design, new tech, and we're here to see if it's a worthy contender against big rivals like the Volkswagen Golf. So if Peugeot wants to head upmarket, they're going to be asking an upmarket price. This Peugeot 308 GT Premium costs just over $53,000 drive away here in Australia. You're getting a 1.2 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged engine under the bonnet, producing 96 kilowatts, around 130 horsepower, and 230 newton meters of torque. Not a huge amount of power, but definitely is a European type power plant where European hatchbacks make the most of the smallest engines they can throw in them. So what are you getting when you spend $53,000 on a Peugeot 308 in 2023? Well, first of all, there's a new design. You're getting these LED headlamps, which look really cool, and you've got these sort of fang elements that run down the front of your car. You also have a black badge, new badges, and 308 spelled out across the front. Moving along the side, you have 18-inch wheels, which are black, and they have a really cool design to them as well, wrapped in a Michelin rubber. You also have Ferrari-like side shields, which was the new Peugeot badge, which I like quite a lot. That looks great. You have black side mirrors, you have keyless entry and locking. You also have these really cool side skirts along the side. Talking about the paint, this is this olive green paint, which looks really quite good. And then towards the back, you have these LED tail lamps, and you've also got a new badge at the rear. And if you do buy the Peugeot 308 GT, you do get a GT badge, but then this car also does have some chrome elements down below to sort of replicate the look of dual exit exhausts, even though they're fake exhausts. Now here's what your key looks like, which is quite good. These are your operations here. You have your locking, boot release, and unlocking. And when you unlock the car, the lights do a cool little animation, which is kind of cool. So you lock it and you unlock it, and they do this little dance here. And then when you lock the car, it does make a funny sound. Now check it out, on the interior, this is where things get very interesting. We have Nappa leather seats in here, which are heated and massaging, but only this side is electronically adjustable. You have manual adjustments for the passenger there. You also have the Peugeot logo embossed in the headrest, which looks quite cool. You have this really nice looking small sporty steering wheel, which is a 2-spoke design, quite nice. You have this cool Peugeot side skirt. You have aluminium looking pedals. You also have lots of green stitching running around this car. That's sort of the theme of this car, is all green. When you go to start up this car, you press the start stop button there, and then everything activates. Here we have a digital driver's display, but it is a 3D effect. So you can go and see under here, there's another screen projecting another display, which makes this look like it's a 3D type screen. Now you have these buttons here on the stalks, which allow you to go through different menus on this screen, which gives you different views, which is quite cool. And yeah, it's a very handy display. I really like it, and it's quite responsive as well. Now over here we have our digital infotainment, which is really quite useful, and it's actually a really awesome UI and user experience. So down here, these aren't physical buttons, these are all digital buttons. So you press them and they'll send you to the different menus, and they sort of change depending on what's on the screen, which is kind of cool. Got a big home button there, love to see that. Down below we have a physical volume knob, which has got a little indentation, which is quite cool, but we love the fact that we have that. We have quick access to our car settings, climate controls, and everything that we need to quickly activate on this car, which I like a lot. You have a wireless Apple CarPlay, which is great, and you do have your dual zone climate controls through here as well, and it's just a pretty easy UI. It could be a little more simple. There's a lot of menus and swiping and all that sort of stuff, but I do find it quite fascinating how many different massaging settings there are. There's a ton of them here. It just keeps going, and they're really quite nice. So I think that is quite the highlight in here, the fact that this car has massaging seats. Now you have a wireless charger down here, you have another storage area there, you have a USB Type-C port there, you have a 12-volt socket. Here's what your shifter looks like. It's a little lever that you sort of pull backwards and forwards. It has a little park button there, the size of a fingernail, which is just, you know, maybe a bit too small. You have your drive mode button there to go between eco, normal, and sport, and then depending on which drive mode you're in, your cluster will change a theme. So it will go into a more sporty theme when you're in sport, and then it'll go back to this green theme in normal, and you can change all these colors through the settings as well. Here's our cup holders, which is quite useful, and here I have my cord for my phone charging, which is quite cool. So it sort of looks like it's coming out from nowhere, but when you pop open this very clever glove box, which is really quite deep, you can see here that you can feed the cord straight through there, so you don't have any sort of messy cables. So you can either put a cord up there or a cord back here. And yes, it is very spacious in this center glove box, and I like how you can close it individually. Now, the biggest elephant in the room is this steering wheel. While it looks quite good, as you can see from my point of view right here, it sort of blocks the screen there. So you have to adjust it lower down to be able to see over the top of it. You can't push it higher up because you won't be able to see your entire screen through this gap here. I don't know why Peugeot is so insistent on doing this. They have great interiors, but this is one thing that has been a common theme in their car. Toyota puts their screen above, like further up on the dashboard where it's not an issue on the new Prius, for example, but here it's just in the way just a little bit, which I find just frustrating because I love looking at the screen. I love the fact there's a Peugeot logo down there with a little French flag, but really my view is sort of like this, where the bottom is cut off and you're only seeing just like a little bit of the screen, where you're missing that bottom bit of the display down the bottom, because this is sort of the most comfortable driving position for me. I just wish this was something Peugeot took a little bit more seriously and worked a little bit better on, but I don't really enjoy having to push the steering wheel further down than I would like just to be able to see that display. Now moving on, I really do like this green stitching running across the top here. This GT model also has this focal audio system, which is pretty nice, but it's not so great for phone calls. I don't know why there is a disparity between the audio and phone calls, but there is, so that's that. You have some ambient lighting along here as well. I do like this suede material on the doors. As for the build quality, it's all very nice. Like, it's very hard to sort of get things to sort of creak and like crack on their own. It's all very solidly built in here. It feels very European in that way, which is a very good thing. And as for additional storage, the glove box is massive, and you've also got pretty large door bins with some felt in there as well to stop things rattling around, which can fit a very large water bottle. And of course you have this giant glass roof, which is pretty big as well. It's a sunroof, and then you have to manually close it, which means you have to reach all the way back here to be able to reach that slide, but at least it fully blocks out there instead of being a partial block. But yeah, I like keeping it open because it brings in plenty of light into this cabin. Now in the back, it's pretty easy to jump in here. You have a nice large entryway, and then once I jump in, I'm pretty comfortable, except it is a little bit tight for my knees back here. As you can see, thanks to these cutouts, they sort of rest in the seat a little bit. The room underneath the seat in front of me isn't great for my feet. I have size 11 feet, I'm 5'11", so it is a tiny bit cramped back here, but once I raise up my headrest, it's okay. In the back, we have two air vents. We have two USB Type-C ports, a little pocket to put little bits and pieces. You have two little map pockets, which are nets. You've also got some small door bins in here, and they're not felt lined, so things will sort of make a bit of noise if they're stuck in there. I do like the seat material and build in the back as well. And what's cool is that instead of having the ISOFIX points behind some ugly plastic, they're hidden behind some nice little zippers, which is quite cool. So that feels just a little bit more premium. Except what doesn't feel premium is that there is no armrest. I don't know why Peugeot have excluded that, but yeah, no armrest in the back for these passengers. But it is nice to be able to look out the back through these large windows. Do they go down all the way? Let's test. Most of the way. That's a good pass. And yeah, the build quality is okay in the back too. It's a little bit scratchy plastics back here compared to the front, but overall it's a pretty comfortable rear seat. Now this middle seat is going to be a little bit too tight for 3 adults to be sitting across the back, so this is a jump seat, but it's not too uncomfortable, so you could do it for slightly longer trips, but ultimately this is a good car for 4 people. So to open up the boot here, you press this button that's sitting above the badge, which is a little bit unusual because usually you're down here or on the badge, but instead it's pushed above the badge. And in here we have 384 litres of cargo space, and then when you fold the 60-40 split down, we have 1,259 litres of storage space, which means you have more boot space with the seats up than a Volkswagen Golf. But unfortunately there's no ski pass through, so you're going to have to sacrifice your seating position and comfort in the second row if you want to put longer items through, where in the Golf there's a little cutout, so it means you can sit 4 people plus push longer cargo through the middle. And what I found to be a little bit disappointing is that there is no spare tyre in this car. And also I thought these grab handles here were just a little flimsy for a car that's meant to feel a bit premium. Now, I think it's subpar that this car scored only 4 out of 5 from Australia's ANCAP safety rating system. I think every new car you look at buying in 2023 should have a 5 out of 5 score, because you just want everyone to be safe in case of a major accident. This car failed to score a 5 out of 5 because the adult occupants had a high likelihood of having chest injuries in an accident in this car compared to other vehicles in its class, which I think, is something that shouldn't really be an issue in 2023. But then Peugeot have moved to try and make this car a bit safer for the Australian market, upmarket by throwing on a autonomous emergency braking system that works by using the camera and the radar system to try and reduce the likelihood of an accident. And that brings me on to my top 3 safety picks on this car. Number 1 would be that autonomous emergency braking, and I like the fact that it actually works in low light and dusk as well, which some other systems sort of fail to work well in that area, so that is quite good. Also on that system as well, for number 2, is the fact it's nice and active, so it does warn you if you're traveling too close to someone, or if you're actually, about to hit something or it thinks you're about to hit something, it does flash up very bright in the screen before it intervenes, which I think is really quite good. And number 3 is the 360-degree parking cameras, particularly the front and rear, which do pivot and have a really good field of view and nice and clear. And I think that's great for when you're maneuvering out into traffic or just reversing out of a driveway. It's something that's nice and good to have on a car like this to make sure you reduce your likelihood of actually hitting anything. But then moving on to what most people think about when buying a Peugeot, which is warranty, servicing and reliability. So first of all, your warranty is a 5-year unlimited kilometer warranty, which is pretty standard. Your servicing occurs every 12 months or every 15,000 kilometers. Again, nice and standard and good intervals as well. And then the best way to pay for services would be to prepay. So you're going to pay $1,000 for 3 years of services, or you're going to pay $1,800 for 5 years of services, which is really quite good for a European hatchback like this. And I can see that Peugeot is trying to attract people with lower servicing costs to try and go, hey, we're better than we used to be, so you should come on over, and it's going to be cheaper to own a Peugeot than some rival cars in this category. And so that leads me on to reliability. So in the past, Peugeot hasn't had a great reputation for reliability. The Peugeot 308 on productreview.com.au scores a 3.2 out of 5 from owners who have bought and owned Peugeot 308s. And look, that's not a perfect score. It means that most people like their car, but there are plenty of instances where people have encountered reliability issues with their vehicle. Now, this car is utilizing a relatively new motor for Peugeot, and people have said the best way to make sure this engine works well is to avoid just doing bumper-to-bumper traffic and gridlock type crawling traffic. This engine likes to sort of be revved out a little bit more, and it likes those trips to sort of, warm it up and get it up through the rev range. So that is something that I would encourage if you own this car. Try to avoid just driving in bumper to bumper traffic all the time. That's with most cars, but I've heard from mechanics that this motor likes doing, highway driving just a little bit more than just sitting around in traffic. So look, I hope for Peugeot's sake, because this is a really brilliant car, that their reliability does dramatically improve with this car here. Now, don't let this power fool you on paper. This car does feel like it has plenty of power under the bonnet, and that's thanks to that turbocharger providing just a little bit more torque than a naturally aspirated motor. Sure, we all love more power, but if this is what's given to us in the Peugeot, I have to say it is plenty. So if we sort of slow down here and go to accelerate, you can sort of get an idea of how quick it is. So going from 30 to 60 in 3, 2, 1. Takes a while for the gearbox to kick down though. And there we go. So it just starts to move along, and it's really all you need in a daily driver. I found the 308 to actually be very comfortable as well. The suspension, even on rough roads that can be like this on the back roads of a countryside, yeah, it does a good job just staying composed, doesn't shake itself apart. It's really quite a luxurious driving experience. It feels nice and heavy, it feels planted, and I really enjoy cruising around in the 308. Now, as for the gearbox, it does have paddles, and they're nicely trimmed, but I don't really use them. You can use them, if you want to go into sport mode, and then you have your fake sport noise, which you can toggle on and off, and then you have something a bit more aggressive. The steering wheel gets a little bit tighter, and away you go. But to be honest, it's not really something I'm using all the time in this car. Now, I do have normal and eco mode that are after sport, and to be honest, I don't even bother going to eco mode. I just stick in normal all the time, and it's easy enough to drive around. Now, the complaint I have with this motor is that it is just a little rough at low RPMs. I can't really distinguish if it's the gearbox or the engine, but it doesn't really like being driven off the line. So it's like when you're in bumper to bumper traffic and you're sort of crawling forwards and backwards, it sort of does grumble around a little bit. But once you're just moving a little bit along and anything above that, it feels nice and comfortable. Now, the driver assist in this car, you do have radar, cruise control, and active lane keep assist, and all those sorts of things. And look, it does a really good job out on the highway. I really appreciate how this car drives when you've got all the assists turned on. But again, in traffic, the Peugeot doesn't really like bumper to bumper traffic. It's really harsh on the brakes, trying to keep a distance between the car and front. And so I didn't really find it great as a traffic assist system, more of a highway cruising type driver assist. So yeah, I didn't really use the radar, 2-hour cruise in bumper-to-bumper traffic. But getting out to my location out here, which is a lot of highway driving, yep, I used it and it was great. So it's fine in that regard. Now, as for the brakes, we'll do an emergency brake test in 3, 2, 1, and there we go. So what I love about these brakes is that they're nice and soft and spongy. That's what you expect for a luxury hatchback like this. It's not looking to be sporty, and it's not, you know, a cheap set of brakes that, well, they don't feel cheap. They feel nice and plush and really allow this car to coast and cruise to a stop without feeling too abrupt, and they're really easy to modulate. So that's why I didn't really need to have to use the driver assist in bumper-to-bumper traffic, because the brakes are nice and doughy and just have a nice bit of plush movement in them. That means that the whole car won't be lurching forwards and backwards, but then that is a little bit let down by how jerky this car can be with its motor and possibly gearbox at low speeds. Now, so sound isolation, super quiet in here. It's a really luxurious space. I really quite like it a lot. You can have a normal conversation here and it just feels a cut above the rest. It doesn't really feel like another hatchback in here, and it's a lot quieter than the Mazda 3 and the Volkswagen GTI that I tested. And as for the ergonomics in here, I love the fact this car has massaging seats. That is a major plus. It just makes, you know, longer trips or even traffic just a little less stressful. And you've also just got a pretty decent driving position, even though the steering wheel at first feels a bit lower because you have to use it to get a little bit lower just to look at the instrument cluster in front of me because of how awkward it's all set up. You actually get used to it pretty quick and it becomes a very cozy little car. So yeah, I do find the Peugeot 308 a pretty nice car to drive, but don't think it's going to be some sort of hot hatch despite having paddle shifters and all that. It is a little bit low on horsepower, but I think that's ideal for daily driving. Now, so the turning radius, this car has a really good turning radius, and that's something I noted when I jumped into this thing. It's actually really quite good at just making quick turns, and yeah, I mean, that was a major shock there. Now, the other thing as well is fuel economy in here. So average fuel economy has been around 8.2, 8.7 litres per 100 Ks, and this is a 3-cylinder motor, so look, that's around expected, but I did see it hit 10 litres per 100 Ks on some points. So yeah, just be careful how heavy you are on your right foot, because it can get a little thirsty for a 1.2 litre 3-cylinder in here. But I'm going to be real with you, I did not expect a Peugeot like this to impress me this much with the amount of technology it has and just how composed it is to drive. This is definitely a move above what Peugeot used to make. So I easily think that this is the best hatchback to come out from Peugeot. The power plant could do with a kick up the bum for a little bit more power, or at least offering some buyers a bit more power for the Australian market. But overall, I really like how this thing drives. It's comfortable, it's ergonomic, it's great to look at. I love the tech in here, and I actually really like the servicing costs if you prepay them for either 3 or 5 years. It's nice and low, and hopefully this car keeps up the reliability standards that Peugeot is hopefully aiming for, because that is just something that I would personally be worried about when buying this car, is that these cars have a sketchy history of being reliable in their older models. This is the new Peugeot 308, and I really hope that Peugeot have worked hard to make these more reliable than ever. I've heard good things about the new models of Peugeot, so that's why I would consider and say put it on your consider list when shopping against rivals like the Volkswagen Golf, or even heading up market to something like a BMW 1 Series. I definitely think this is worth your attention. But if this car is to succeed in the Australian market and actually be considered seriously as a luxury European hatchback, Peugeot has to make sure that that reliability history improves and can match something like the Volkswagen Golf. But as a brand new European hatchback, I definitely think Peugeot have nailed this as being a new start for the brand, especially wearing this new set of badges. Now, thank you so much for watching. If you want to leave a review of your car, make sure you jump to productreview.com.au to do that, because I use your reviews to let other people know if your car is worth buying. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.